Evil Dead Burn is the sequel to Evil Dead Rise. I loved Evil Dead Rise, possibly my favorite in the whole Evil Dead franchise, other than maybe Evil Dead 2. I would need to revisit them. I was originally going to marathon all of these before watching this, but after hearing that we already have a confirmed sequel coming out to this one, I think I'm going to wait till we get the into this kind of trilogy and then go through them all again. I have seen every Evil Dead film except for the 2013 one. Now, one thing I hear a lot amongst fans of the Evil Dead franchise is some people want it to lean more into its campy comedic roots, and some people want it to lean into its actual horror, mean-spiritedness, its gore. I like both. I'm happy with both. I don't necessarily care what direction it takes as long as it does it well. This film is not funny at all. It's not. Rise had some humor to it. This one does not. What this has is full tilt into mean-spirited gore. There is a lot of contempt for our cast here, and it is brutal. It is vicious. I was squirming in my seat. I was mostly alone in the theater watching this, which I think kind of added to it. I was actually creeped out because there was a bit with a sound occurring in the film about an hour and a half in. And right at this point, a girl came in on crutches and she was looking straight down the whole time. And she like matched her crutches with the sound beat of the movie, like so perfectly synchronized. I thought she was like doing it on purpose. And then she sat directly behind me, the only other person in the theater. I'm not gonna lie, that I got a little creeped out for a second. But this starts off at 100 and just continues to be very brutal and vicious its entire runtime. I really liked the opening scene. Even the title card is once again great. I still think Rise has one of the best title cards I've ever seen in any movie, period. It is not quite as good as Rise's, but it is still a damn good title card. These films are just doing great with that. There's a transition very early, like not even 5 minutes into the film, that was so bizarre and out there, it had me cackling at just the absurdity of it. And we finally get to meet our main cast. There's a couple characters we get to know pretty well. There actually is some scenes that could arguably be considered dark comedy. There's a particular scene at a funeral that is certainly an uncomfortable watch, not necessarily for reasons of horror, more so several social faux pas. I was not as attached to this cast as I was in Rise. I think the children in Rise add a lot. The characters in this are pretty much all adults for the most part, but they do have their own, unique traits. Our main character in particular goes through a compelling arc. One thing I want to point out, and I have to say this. I don't think it'll necessarily spoil anything, but I have to point out the parallelisms. This film has a ludicrous amount in common with the romance Colleen Hoover adaptation, It Ends With Us. And I know those are two completely different films. One is a romantic drama. This is a gory horror film. I want to hear from someone else who has watched both of those movies, because it's not just like the character arc. It's not just like the plot. There are like numerous plot beats that are near identical between these two films. And I kept getting flashbacks to that film as I was watching it. I was like, well, what is going on here? Like, it was so overt at parts. I felt like this was borderline ripping off it. So if you've seen It Ends With Us and you've seen Evil Dead Burn, please tell me if you picked up on what I'm talking about, because this is such a weird comparison that I want to hear more people talk about, because I don't think it's at all a stretch what I'm saying here. I know it sounds very bizarre. These films have a lot in common. There is actually quite a bit of effort here to continue to build on the lore of the Evil Dead franchise, which I actually didn't like that much. I could care less about the lore and whatnot. Like, just give me a good story. I don't need exposition on how everything works and what's going on with stuff like that. Some people are very happy about that and good for them, but that's not what I care about. I was also not really a fan of the mid-credits or post-credits scene. Those kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, and not the kind of bad taste that I wanted from this. However, most of this film gave me the exact kind of bad taste I was looking for. There are some really gnarly effects in this. You feel that humans are made of flesh, and flesh is a very impermanent thing. There are parts where this feels genuinely evil. So it's definitely living up to its title there. Eventually, it does kind of devolve into the final girl trope, and well, our ending is fairly cathartic in completing her character arc. I feel like it's almost so cathartic that it feels a little out of place in this film, considering that the first 2/3 of it is so mean-spirited, but it does kind of work as a satisfying ending. I definitely enjoyed this the entire time. I was never bored. I don't know how you even could be bored at something like this. I think if you're sensitive to horror, this would definitely get under your skin. I can't say I was necessarily scared, but I was squirming in my seat at some of the gore, which is realistically about the maximum most horror films can accomplish for me. So that's pretty high praise. I think you could definitely watch this without having seen Rise. I don't think it's necessarily essential to it. There is some connective tissue, but I wouldn't call it necessary to watch this. You could absolutely see this film in isolation and it would still feel like a complete story. I would like the next film to either maybe go a bit more comedic or at least a more satisfying main villain character. Rise really outdoes this film in that department. The mom in Rise is absolutely 1,000 times more memorable than what we get here. But overall, this is still a really good time. If you're a fan of gore and mean-spirited horror, that is what you're gonna get. It exceeds at what it's trying to do. I can understand if you don't like what it's trying to do, but it definitely manages what it set out to. I gave Evil Dead Burn a 4 out of 6. Now, I will say this is a film I have kind of started to feel a little bit colder on the more I've sat with it outside of the theater, but I'm going to stick with my initial impression of right out of the theater because I was feeling kind of excited. I was feeling those highs, and I'm going to stick with a 4 for now.